It's been a few months since I moved into my new suburban home with my wife and kids. I'm a lawyer in my mid-30s, and I've always been proud of my property. I like to keep things neat and tidy, and have always been one to respect the rules. But when the HOA board started causing trouble, I knew I had to take a stand. One day, I decided to build a fence around my property. It wasn't anything too fancy, just a simple wooden fence to keep my kids and dogs safe. But I knew the HOA board wouldn't be happy about it, and I was right. The very next day, Karen, a member of the board, came knocking at my door. "You can't just build a fence without HOA approval. This is a violation of the rules," she said, her arms crossed and her face stern. "I know my rights," I replied calmly. "I'm a lawyer, and I've done my research. I have every right to build this fence." "Well, if you don't take it down, we'll have to take legal action," Karen threatened. "I'm not taking it down. I'm well within my rights," I said firmly. I could see the anger in Karen's face as I stood my ground. She was clearly not used to people standing up to her. "You're just trying to show off to your neighbors," Karen said with a sneer. "You don't care about anyone but yourself." "That's not true," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "I'm just standing up for what's right." "You're violating the rules," Karen said, getting louder. "You're putting everyone in danger with that fence." "That's ridiculous," I shot back. "The fence is perfectly safe. I'm not taking it down." Karen was now practically screaming. "You're an entitled lawyer who thinks he's above the law. Well, you're not, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." I could feel my blood boiling as Karen continued to berate me. She was clearly trying to get under my skin, but I refused to let her win. I knew I was in the right, and I was going to fight for my property. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Karen, you're being unreasonable. I have every right to build this fence, and I'm not taking it down." "You're just an entitled lawyer who thinks he's above the law," Karen spat. "Well, you're not, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." I could feel the anger boiling inside of me. How dare she speak to me like that? How dare she think she could bully me into submission? "I'm not entitled," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm just standing up for what's right." "You're not standing up for anything," Karen said with a smirk. "You're just being selfish." I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my voice and let all my frustration out. "No, Karen, you're the selfish one here. You think you can just dictate what everyone else does. Well, I'm not going to let you get away with it. I'll see you in court." I couldn't believe how much Karen was getting under my skin. I knew I was in the right, but her constant berating was starting to wear me down. I needed to get some support from other people if I was going to keep fighting. Luckily, my neighbor saw the whole thing and came over to my house the next day. "Hey Jack, don't worry about Karen," he said. "She's always causing trouble for everyone. Your fence looks great, and you have every right to keep it up." I was grateful for his support, but I still felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. So, I called up a friend of mine who was also a lawyer. "Hey, I need your help," I said when he answered the phone. "The HOA board is trying to sue me for building a fence on my property." "Really?" my friend replied. "That's ridiculous. You have every right to build a fence on your own property. Let me see what I can do to help." Over the next few weeks, my friend worked tirelessly to build a case against the HOA board. He gathered evidence such as photographs and documentation of previous cases of homeowners who were allowed to build similar fences. He researched the law and found legal precedents that supported my argument. For example, he found a case in a neighboring state where a judge ruled in favor of a homeowner who built a similar fence. He also prepared a convincing argument that highlighted the many flaws in the HOA board's case. I needed my friend's help because he was well-versed in property law. While I had a general understanding of the law, he had specialized knowledge that was invaluable in building my case. He was able to find legal precedents and statutes that supported my argument, and he was able to anticipate and counter the arguments that the HOA board's lawyers would likely make. Without him, I don't think I would have been able to win the trial. His help was instrumental in my victory. Karen was there, of course, smirking at me from across the room, but I didn't let her get to me. I knew I had the law on my side, and I was going to win this thing. The trial lasted all day, but in the end, the judge ruled in my favor. He agreed that I had every right to build the fence on my property, and that the HOA board had no grounds to sue me. Karen was furious, but I didn't care. I had won, and that's all that mattered. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was finally free from Karen's constant harassment, and I could enjoy my property without worrying about her anymore. Pandari. I thought being a grandparent would be easy, but I was wrong. My daughter-in-law seems to want nothing to do with me, and it's affecting my relationship with my son and new granddaughter. Despite my efforts to make things right, the tension only seems to be getting worse. Here's how it all went down. I am a 50-year-old female. My daughter-in-law, 24F, gave birth, but she doesn't seem to want a relationship with me, which makes it difficult to have a relationship with my son, 31M, and new granddaughter. My son David, 31, has been married to my daughter-in-law B, 24, since September 2020. Due to the pandemic, I never really got to know her because they only dated for about a year before they got married, and I didn't know about her until they had dated for about 6 months. I love my son very much, but I feel like our relationship has been rocky since they got married. He has a daughter from a previous relationship who is 10, and since they got together, I haven't had the same relationship with her. I know this is partially because he moved out of my house, very suddenly without really saying anything, I may add, and I no longer get her on his weekends. I try to get them to bring her to visit when they have her, but usually, I only see her once a month or so. And lately, it has felt like she has been more distant when she visits. I think this is because B says negative things about me around her, and I find that unfair. They just had a baby at the end of January. She was induced due to preeclampsia and in labor for 3 days before having a C-section. I had been in an accident a few weeks prior and don't have a vehicle, and my son refused to pick me up to be there for the labor at all, or to see the baby in the hospital. But her parents got to see the baby and were in the parking lot the entire time. I called him while she was in labor a few times, but on the second day after her water broke, I called him and heard her snap at him to get off the phone, and he refused to accept any calls after that. I just wanted to know that the three of them were okay though. She was in the hospital 2 days after the C-section, and they wouldn't stop to visit me on their way home after the birth because she was hurting, even though she had painkillers she could have taken, and she didn't feel right, according to my son. This is when I became concerned she had PPD. My daughter ended up picking up her prescriptions and some groceries for them, and got to see the baby that night. Her and B have a relationship that is apparently pretty good. I was supposed to visit a couple of days after they got home, but she ended up insisting that something was wrong, and went back to the doctor, who apparently sent her to the hospital. My son told me they diagnosed her with postpartum preeclampsia, but I was pretty certain that it was only something that happened during pregnancy, and went away after birth, so I was pretty sure he was confused. The day after they admitted her again, 5 days after the baby was born with everyone meeting her but me, was my birthday. I called her around 8 that morning to see what was really going on, but she didn't answer. A while later, my son called me and wished me a happy birthday, and asked why I had called B. I admit I snapped at him, and said she should be returning my call because I called her. I hung up on him, and maybe 5 minutes later, she called me. I told her she should have called me, and that I wanted to hear her voice, and hear from her what was going on since my son gets confused. I then asked her if this was a mental or physical issue, and she went silent before saying physical. I asked if she was sure, and she got kind of snippy, and said they had padding on her bed because she was a seizure risk, and she couldn't be alone with her newborn, so she was pretty sure. I didn't comment on her tone because I was sure she was stressed. She was released the next day, and they came and visited me while I was at my daughter's watching her 2 kids on their way home so I could see the baby. I offered her some pillows to sit on. My son said she basically gave birth both ways. Even though I knew this wasn't true, I wondered if she had some soreness that made him think this, and she refused my hospitality, saying she was fine and felt pretty good. 2 weeks later, my son picked me up and brought me to their home to visit. I stayed for a few hours, but she didn't make any effort to talk to me. She was just quiet and sat on the couch. When my son took me home, I asked why she was so inhospitable, and he said I had been rude while she was in the hospital. He said that she shouldn't have had to call me, and I shouldn't have asked if it was a mental or physical problem because he had already told me it was physical. He also said that I shouldn't have posted anything on Facebook before her about the baby being born, and that I was rude when he called to make me take it down. She doesn't post on social media very often, so I didn't think it would be a big deal. He hasn't picked me up to see the baby because he says he needs to be there to help with the baby, and they won't bring the baby to me because he says the baby isn't allowed in my house. I told my son that I'm planning to quit my job to babysit for them, but I haven't even gotten her return to work date, and she hasn't once thanked me for doing it. Overall, I feel like she's holding on to some very petty things and is using them to keep me from my son and granddaughters. I want a relationship with her, but I am missing some critical bonding time with the baby, and I'm going to struggle to forgive her for it, especially over petty nonsense she won't even bring up to talk to me. I really want to send a text and lay all my feelings out for her and just hash it out, but I understand there are probably cultural differences at play with all of this too, so I could use some advice on what to say. Relevant comments. A commenter said, "Lady, if you don't pull your head out of your butt, you're not going to be part of their lives at all. You're not owed nearly any of what you seem to think you are. When it comes to their baby, they don't owe you crap. 1. Your son had 2 priorities when his wife was in labor, his wife and their baby, not you. He didn't have time to come pick you up or talk to you on the phone. Have you ever heard of a taxi cab? 2. She shouldn't have to take a pain pill just so they can stop by and see you on their way home. How incredibly selfish of you. They did the right thing and went straight home. 3. Are you seriously questioning a doctor's diagnosis? Do you really think it's appropriate to ask her if it's physical or mental? Are you mental? 4. You're lucky anyone called you back at all. They are tired and are learning how to care for their newborn, and that is after your daughter-in-law had a complicated labor and delivery and complications after birth. No one has the emotional bandwidth to deal with your entitlement. 5. You inconvenienced your son and had him pick you up and drive you home. Again, taxi, Uber, Lyft were better options. Then you're complaining his wife, who is exhausted and still healing, was inhospitable. I'm guessing she was saying plenty to you in her head, but was too polite to actually verbalize it. 6. Do they even want you babysitting their baby? Did they actually ask this of you, or did you just decree that this is what is happening? 7. You do not post baby news on Facebook without the parent's permission. You were rude and overstepping. 8. If you want to send them a text, send them a sincere apology for being a pushy, entitled pain in the butt, and promise you'll behave better in the future. This was the OP's response. I'm a grandparent and do deserve to be in my grandchildren's life. I also deserve not to have my eldest granddaughter turned against me. Saying they owe me nothing is incorrect, and courts would agree with that. I love them both, so I don't want it to come to that, but I am owed that. 1. If he would have came the first night before she was in real labor, he wouldn't have needed to talk to me. We don't have taxi cabs, and the Uber would have been well put of my budget. 2. She refused to take any of the painkillers once discharged. Period. That was selfish of her, and I had food for them too, so my son wouldn't have had to cook. It wasn't just for me to see the baby. 3. No, I was questioned if my son had the right information. He's relayed wrong things before. 4. I understand that from her perspective after reading some of the comments. However, in my family it's just common to call back regardless, especially after having a baby. I see it's a cultural difference. 5. I can't Uber to where they live, otherwise I would be there every day. If that was an option, I would have definitely jumped on it instead of having him pick me up. But Uber isn't their tiny town. 6. I told my son after I heard B telling my daughter about her struggle to find reputable daycare without a year-long wait, and how she was scared for the safety of her baby. They won't have to worry if I watch her. 7. My son just said not to post pictures. I didn't realize announcing I was a grandma again would be a big deal. I deleted it. 8. I told my son I was sorry for hurting her feelings when he told me. I've always apologized to him when he's told me I've done something wrong in her eyes, whether I think it was wrong or not. I don't want to hurt her feelings ever. I want her to know she doesn't have to run to my son though. She can come to me, and I want a chance to explain myself to her. Another commenter asked, wait, you told them you were quitting your job to babysit? I told my son that I would help after I heard B telling my daughter about her struggle to find reputable daycare without a year-long wait, and how she was scared for the safety of her baby. They won't have to worry if I watch her. It wouldn't be for free, and I own my house outright, so I have no mortgage. I don't plan to live with them. I also had planned to watch my daughter's 2 children, but we are currently not on speaking terms, so I may get a part-time job for weekends to supplement my income a little bit. Either way, I will be okay. Here's one last gem from OP. I agree that she seems to have no respect for me as her mother-in-law. It's very disappointing. I'm astounded by all the people who don't believe grandparents are needed in children's lives, and that they owe us nothing. Without me, that child would not be here, and I don't think she realizes that. I wish my son had handled a lot of this differently. It feels like people believe children can be used as pawns when grandparents don't agree with them. The OP then went and created another thread, but this time asking for legal advice. Here's what she said. I am seeking advice on how to obtain grandparent rights in Indiana. My son has 2 daughters with 2 different women. The oldest is 10, and he and her mother were never married. There is no custody agreement. They just have an informal agreement. The youngest is almost 2 months old, and he and her mother are married. I was under the impression that any grandparent could petition for custody visitation in the U.S., but the way I am reading it, I cannot unless my son is incarcerated or they are not married. Is this correct? What do I need to do to seek joint custody of my granddaughters? What do I need to build a solid case? I have already tried resolving this without going to such drastic measures, but his wife does not want to work with me. A commenter pointed out that she does not qualify for grandparents' rights in this scenario because she saw them at Christmas and they have able parents. The OP responded, I was under the impression that grandparents' rights were for when a parent is keeping a child from having a relationship with the grandparents. Visitation would be more than once every 3 months or once a month, wouldn't it? I don't feel like there is much of a relationship left with any of them to torpedo. So if I sacrifice a relationship with them to have a relationship with my granddaughters, that would be fine. Other people in the comments draw attention to her previous post, and that she's angry her son moved out. I can't travel to see them currently. If I could, I would visit them as often as possible. I have apologized even though I don't think I was wrong. If she felt slighted by anything I said, I apologized for it. However, I don't think it should matter. You shouldn't use kids as pawns. I should be able to have a relationship with my granddaughters without her. That's what I thought grandparents' rights were for, to ensure that parents couldn't stop an essential relationship with grandparents without a good reason, like abuse, drug use, etc. Also, he didn't need my permission to move. I just didn't appreciate that he gave no indication he was leaving. I have apologized for everything she felt I did wrong, against my better judgment. I don't feel like I should have to continue to beg. My son says she's not preventing me from seeing them and appreciates my apologies, but I still haven't seen my grandchildren. The OP left another update, now 3 weeks after the original post. Well, I apologized to my daughter-in-law for all the things my son listed. Since I had received feedback about it being my son's job to handle his family, I told him my apologies to pass along, and then I waited. However, I got no response from B. No thank you, no trying to bury the hatchet, nothing. So, last Friday, I made an appointment with an attorney to discuss grandparents' rights and had that appointment on Tuesday. The lawyer told me I had a good chance with my older granddaughter, but would likely get nowhere with the baby. I filled out some paperwork to get the process started, but Tuesday night I was questioning if I was doing the right thing. I called one of my friends to discuss and was seriously considering not moving forward with it after talking to her. Then yesterday, I received this message from B. Me, this is B. I just wanted to let you know that friend told us you're intending to go for grandparent rights and also shared everything you've had to say about me. Let me first say that I have not once kept either of the girls from you, and I certainly have not kept son from you. He is a grown-ass man, and if he wanted to talk to you, he was free to. You have not asked to come over and visit since son picked you up. You cannot expect us to 1, read your mind, or 2, drop everything and come pick you up. We have a new baby, and we have our own lives. I also have not said a word to you about what happened during delivery postpartum, because I have no energy to argue with you. Son said you apologized, and I told him I appreciated it, even though it was not a real apology. You apologize for what you did to hurt my feelings, not that my feelings were hurt. I don't have time for your drama. For the record though, what you said was absolutely disgusting. I almost died. It had nothing to do with my mental health. Since you have decided to go for grandparents' rights, we will have no direct contact with you. All contact will need to go through our lawyer. You have been removed from my Facebook. You are not permitted to post any pictures you have been sent of my child on social media, and older granddaughter's mom feels the same way regarding older granddaughter. We intend to have something written up by our lawyer and sent to you by the end of the week regarding this and ceasing contact with us. I assume we will be served with your visitation paperwork this week as well. You will get no pictures or phone calls going forward. In fact, you will be blocked. I also hope you realize you will absolutely lose this case. Your house is not suitable to live in, and you would have to be able to pass a drug test. When you lose, we will not resume contact with you. You lost your chance at being a part of our kids' lives by deciding to go to the most nuclear option instead of just communicating with us. I tried to respond to her and tell her that I didn't want to go through with it anymore, and I reacted out of anger, but she wouldn't answer texts or calls, so I assume I really am blocked. I called my son to tell him about the text she sent, and he said he knew about it, and it was a lot nicer than what he wanted to send me. So, that's where I'm at this point. I'm going to show my lawyer the text so that it can show how unwilling to forgive and to work with me she is, and hopefully, it will resolve quickly so I can at least get visitation rights with my oldest granddaughter. Here are some of the relevant comments on this update. A commenter seemed to be a little bit concerned about the drug test. The OP said, "She says that I would have to pass a drug test. I use medical marijuana to help with a chronic illness, but it is still illegal where I live. I am quitting entirely since this is a possibility, getting in trouble." Other people point out that her daughter has cut her off as well. My daughter and I generally make up within a few months. I'm not really worried. She's also more capable to be a mother to her children than my son's wife and other mother are to their daughters with my son. A rather confrontational commenter asked straight up, "Why the hell is your daughter a better mother?" The OP said, "Because they need to have better cultural examples. For instance, the oldest mother is also not from our culture race, and her hair is very different from her daughter's. She has no idea how to take care of her hair. It's always a mess. My daughter-in-law has taken some initiative in doing and styling her hair, but she's still not great at it. The girls need someone who can teach them how to handle basic things like taking care of their skin and hair. Oldest hair has been something I have encouraged them to let me handle long before daughter-in-law came into the picture. Not taking care of a child's hair is a form of neglect. My daughter knows how to do those things because her hair and skin are much closer to theirs, and she can handle it with her own children." And here's one last gem from the OP. No taxis, no bus. Their town is around 3K people. It's around 30 minutes by car, so I can't walk or bike there. I don't feel I deserve to be treated better, but equal. We are both equally important in my son's life. She is obviously more important in her daughter's life right now, but without me that baby wouldn't be here. I would drop the grandparents' rights case if I wasn't cut off. I reacted out of anger and desperation, but now it's the only option since I'm cut off. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to check the other videos on your screen now. Be sure to subscribe too, or you're definitely the jerk.